Hello and welcome to this lab demonstration on using vSphere Lifecycle Manager. After completing this lab video, you will be able to use the vSphere Lifecycle Manager to update all ESXi hosts of a cluster with the same image. Manually updating the image of individual ESXi hosts can be a cumbersome and time-consuming task. In addition, you may easily make mistakes. For example, you might select a wrong image when updating a host, or you may even forget to update a host. The vSphere Lifecycle Manager simplifies tasks such as updating the ESXi host image substantially. It allows you to import ESXi images, vendor add-ons, and components to its image depot. Then you can compose images by adding imported components and vendor add-ons to base ESXi images and save the image so that this new image should be used by all hosts of the Lifecycle Manager enabled cluster. The Lifecycle Manager will immediately check compliance of the ESXi hosts within the cluster. You can then remediate non-compliant hosts by a few mouse clicks. Thanks to vSphere DRS, VMs that are running on a host that is to be remediated will be automatically migrated to other hosts when the update is performed. In summary, the vSphere Lifecycle Manager allows you to update all ESXi hosts of a cluster with the same image in an automated fashion and with ease. For this lab, you should know the vSphere client user interface and you should be familiar with vSphere DRS. In the first task of this lab exercise, we will import an ESXi image, vendor add-ons and components to the Lifecycle image depot. Then we will create a cluster and enable vSphere DRS and vSphere Lifecycle Manager in the cluster. In the next task, we will add ESXi hosts to the newly created cluster. In the final task of the lab, we will save a new cluster image and update ESXi hosts using the saved cluster image. I'm sure I provided you enough good reasons to watch the following video on using vSphere Lifecycle Manager. Now, let's get started. We want to perform the configuration on vCenter server SA VCSA01. So the first step is to connect to this server. Then we log in as administrator at vSphere.local. So in the first task, we want to import an ESXi image, sample vendor add-ons and sample test components to the image depot of the vSphere Lifecycle Manager. From the menu, we select Lifecycle Manager. The image depot page appears in the right pane. Now we want to import an ESXi image to the image depot. So we click Actions and then we select Import Updates. We click Browse to locate the image and we navigate to Desktop, Class Materials and Licenses, and Downloads. Now we select the image that we want to upload and we want to upload this image here. It's an ESXi version 7 image and the build is 158-47920. We click Open and now the image gets uploaded. Under Recent Tasks, you can see that the updates are imported, so they are now added to the image depot. the import completed. So now let's check whether we see this version in the list. We could scroll through the list, but we can also use the search icons here. And now I will type in the last 4 digits of the build number. 7920. And you can see that the image is listed here, so the upload obviously was successful. Now we want to import sample vendor add-ons and components to the image depot. Again, we go to Actions and we select Import Updates. We click Browse, and this time we select the file sample add-ons components.zip. We click Open, and we can see that now this file gets imported. We have a new task in the Recent Tasks pane. The import is complete. To check this imported file, we go to Vendor Add-ons, and now I will search for test. And these are the vendor add-ons that we just imported. We have one more file that we want to import. So again, we click Actions, Import Updates, Browse. And now we want to import the last file from the list here. So we select it and we click Open. Again, we see a new task being added to the Recent Task pane, and we wait for this task to complete. The import completed, and this file included components. So to check whether they are shown, we have to click Components. And again, the components that we imported, they all have the string test in their name. So when we search for test, we can see that we have the test WIP signing certs and 2 additional components, test component 3 and 4. Let's go back to the ESXi versions and have a look at the details of this file, of this image. It shows the version, it shows the category, which is enhancement in this case, and it includes the list of components that are part of this image. We also see the release date. So let's have a look at the vendor add-ons again. Let's pick one of these and have a look at the details again. So here we have a version, again a release date, a category, bug fix in this case, a description, and then the added component. When we click Components and we have a look at the first one that we imported, then we can see details about this uploaded component. Okay, so this is how you upload files, how you import them into the image depot. Now we go to the next task, and in this task we want to create a new cluster where we enable the vSphere Lifecycle Manager. So we select Hosts and Clusters in the Navigator pane. Then we right-click the ICM data center, because that's the data center in which we want to create the new cluster. We select New Cluster. Now we enter the name. and we want to use ICM Compute 02. We want to enable vSphere DRS. And we activate the checkbox Manage all hosts in the cluster with a single image. Why did we enable vSphere DRS? When you use the vSphere Lifecycle Manager to update the ESXi hosts, you want the virtual machines that are running on an ESXi host that is going to be updated to be automatically vMotioned to a different ESXi host. And for this, DRS must be enabled. Now we select the image, the ESXi version that we want to run on all the ESXi hosts within the cluster. And we want to use the version that we previously imported to the image depot. And this was this version here. At this point, we don't want to add optional vendor add-ons. So we just click OK. In the recent tasks, we can see that the cluster is being created. And now where the task has completed, we can see the new cluster in the navigation pane. In the right pane here, we see the cluster quick start, and we see that vSphere DRS and lifecycle management are enabled on the cluster. Now we have to add ESXi hosts to the cluster. We want to add ESXi hosts SA ESXi 01 and SA ESXi 02 to that cluster. And we will have to put these ESXi hosts into maintenance mode. And before we do that, we have to shut down the virtual machines that are currently running on the ESXi hosts. So let's start with SA ESXi 01. In the right pane, I select VMs, and I see that one virtual machine is currently running. It's VM Win1006. Now I right-click the virtual machine. I select Power and shut down Guest OS. Now we have to confirm. And while this virtual machine is being shut down, we can go to our second ESXi host, SA ESXi 02. We have two virtual machines running on this ESXi host. So again, I right-click the first one, I select Power, shut down Guest OS, confirm, and then we do the same for the second virtual machine. So we shut down all the virtual machines that were running on these two ESXi hosts, and we can now put the ESXi hosts into maintenance mode. But before we do that, we want to have a quick look at their current ESXi image version. So we click the Summary tab, and up here, Hypervisor says VMware ESXi 7.0.0, and the build is 158.43807. And that's the same on the other ESXi host. Now we put the hosts into maintenance mode. So we right-click the ESXi host in the navigator pane. We select maintenance mode, and then we click Enter Maintenance Mode. We deselect the Move Powered Off and Suspended Virtual Machines to other hosts in the cluster. And we click OK. Now we do the same for the second ESXi host. We select Maintenance, click Enter Maintenance Mode. We deselect the checkbox here, and then we click OK. In the recent tasks pane at the bottom, we can see that the task is completed, and in the navigator pane, we see that the symbol of the ESXi hosts changed, and that indicates that they are in maintenance mode. Now we can add the ESXi hosts to the cluster that we created earlier. So we drag the ESXi host SA-ESXi01 to our new cluster ICM Compute 02. We keep the default setting here and we click OK. Now we do the same for the second ESXi host, SA-ESXi02. We drag it to our cluster ICM Compute 02. Again, we confirm the default setting here, which is relevant only when we would use resource pools. We are not using resource pools, so we don't have to worry about this at all. We click OK. And now both ESXi hosts are in the ICM Compute 02 cluster. Now we want to take the ESXi hosts out of maintenance mode. So I right click SA-ESXi01. Then we have to select maintenance mode and then we click exit maintenance mode. We do the same for the second ESXi host. And now we can power on the virtual machines again. So we want to power on virtual machines Win1002. We select that virtual machine, we select power, and then we click power on. And then we do the same for Win1004. And Win1006. You can see in the navigator pane that all three virtual machines have been started. Why did we power on these virtual machines? Well, in the next task, we will update the ESXi image on these two ESXi hosts. And I want to demonstrate that you can do that while the virtual machines are running. vSphere DRS will take care about the migration of virtual machines to move virtual machines off an ESXi host that we want to update. So let's do that now. Let's go to the last task, which is updating the ESXi hosts using the cluster image. So we select our cluster in the navigator pane. And then we click the Updates tab. And what we want to do is we want to add vendor add-ons and components to the base ESXi image. Remember, at the very beginning of this lab, we imported an ESXi image, vendor add-ons and components. So in the image pane, we select Edit. And you see that the ESXi version is the one that we configured when we set up the cluster. When we created this cluster and we enabled Lifecycle Manager, at that time we had to choose an image. And we selected the image that we uploaded or imported to the image depot in the first task. So that's why this is pre-populated. That's the image that we chose when we enabled the vSphere Lifecycle Manager in the cluster. Now we want to add vendor add-ons. So we click Select next to the vendor add-on. And it's always easier to use the search function. We want to add one of the add-ons that we imported, and they all included the string test. So we search for test, we get 2 results. And in this case, we only want to add the VM test add-on 1. We select it, then we click select. It is now shown here next to vendor add-on. So this is the one that we want to add to the image. Now we also want to add components. So we click Show Details. Then we click Add Components. Again, we will search for the string test. And we want to add the test VIB signing certs component and the VMW test component 3. So we select the checkboxes and then we click the select button down here. The list of components is created or built, so we will see all the components that are added. And these are the two that we just selected when we clicked Add Components, so they have been successfully added. Now we scroll down here so that we see the buttons, and now we can click Save. So we are saving a new image, which is based on that ESXi base image. And in addition, we added a vendor add-on and we added 2 more components. So in the recent task pane at the bottom, we can see that a new image is saved for the cluster, the one that includes these extra entities. And once this is completed, we see that a new task is scheduled, and this is the check compliance of cluster with image task. So automatically, the Lifecycle Manager is now checking for compliance of the image, which means it verifies or it compares the ESXi images on the ESXi hosts that are in the cluster against this image. So checking the compliance is complete. And now, let me scroll down a little bit here. In the image compliance pane, we can have a look at our 2 ESXi hosts now. And we can see that ESXi host SA ESXi01 is out of compliance with the image. It tells us what the differences are, and it tells us that the host will have to be rebooted during remediation. And since we have exactly the same image on host SA ESXi02, we have the same situation. We are out of compliance. The image needs to be updated, and this will require a reboot. Now we can click Run Pre-Check here, so that we are sure that the cluster is ready for remediation. So in the task pane, we can see new tasks. And in the pane up here, we can see that the pre-check is currently running. The pre-check completed, and as you can see, it says no pre-check issues found. So our cluster is ready for remediation. So we can now click Remediate All here, and this will update the images of our ESXi hosts. So the Review Remediation Impact window opens. So now we should read the impact summary, and it tells us that 2 hosts are non-compliant with the image, that both hosts have to be rebooted, and then we have some additional information. For example, that the VMs may be powered off, suspended, or migrated to other hosts. That the pre-check will be run again as part of the actual remediation process. Because since we ran the last pre-check, things may have changed. So when you actually start the remediation, it always includes a new pre-check. The hosts are remediated one at a time. If you think of our cluster, we only have 2 ESXi hosts, both of them should be updated. Where would we migrate the virtual machines to if both of them would be updated at the same time? And we see that the order of host remediation is determined at runtime. So now where we read all this information, we can go on and click Start Remediation. Now let's watch the recent task pane at the bottom. We see a task that says Remediate Cluster for the ICM Compute O2 cluster. And the remediation will consist of several tasks. We just saw a new one being added, checking compliance of the cluster with the image, so that's part of the pre-check. Now you see that virtual machines get migrated, so VM Win1002 is migrated. So the ESXi host where this virtual machine is currently running is obviously the first ESXi host to be updated. That's why the virtual machine has to be moved to the other ESXi host. When you look to the navigator pane, you can see that ESXi host SA-ESXi01 is in maintenance mode. So this is the ESXi host that is currently being updated. And that means that this virtual machine Win1002 that was migrated is now running on host SA-ESXi02. Let me go back to the cluster so that we can continue watching the remediation process here as well. And actually there is the See More button here, so we can click this and then we see more information about what's going on. And we can see that the installation of the image on the host is already complete. And we can see that rebooting host SA-ESXi01 is already in progress. Once our ESXi host SA-ESXi01 is back up again, what do we expect to happen next? Well, all the virtual machines that are currently running on ESXi host SA-ESXi02 will be migrated to ESXi host SA-ESXi01, so that then ESXi host SA-ESXi02 can be updated. And that's exactly what we see under recent tasks. Virtual machines are being migrated. Currently, it's virtual machine Win1004. So the remediation of host SA-ESXi02 can only start after all the virtual machines have been moved away from that ESXi host, have been migrated to SA-ESXi01. We see the other two virtual machines being migrated. The migration has completed. So ESXi host SA-ESXi02 has been put into maintenance mode. We can see that in the navigator pane. We see that the installation of the image on host SA-ESXi02 has been started. Once this is completed, the host will be rebooted. That's what we see now. The top entry says started to reboot host SA-ESXi02. So that's where we are at. So the reboot completed. Maintenance mode has been left. a compliance check was run for the second host SA-ESXi02, and the remediation is complete. We successfully updated all ESXi hosts of our cluster. We didn't have to do any manual steps. All we said is to remediate all of the ESXi hosts, and the vSphere Lifecycle Manager took care about all the necessary steps, including virtual machine migrations. And that's what we also see now, that virtual machines are migrated back. We have vSphere DRS running, so the load gets distributed across both ESXi servers, and now where SA-ESXi02 is back up, virtual machines get migrated again. If you compare this way of updating ESXi hosts versus doing it manually, one host after the other one, and maybe even doing the migrations manually and so on, you can see that this is a big time saver. Congratulations! You have completed the Using vSphere Lifecycle Manager lab demonstration video. In the first task of this lab, we imported update files to the Lifecycle Manager image depot. Then we created a cluster with vSphere Lifecycle Manager enabled. We also had to enable the vSphere DRS service because this is needed to move virtual machines off the ESXi host that is to be updated. Then we added ESXi hosts to the cluster, and in the final task we performed the actual update. And we did that by saving a new cluster image. This automatically triggered a compliance check. The result of the compliance check was that we have to update all our ESXi hosts. So we ran a pre-check, and when we saw that the pre-check was successful, we performed the actual remediation. That process included vMotion activities, so virtual machines were moved to one ESXi host so that the other one was ready for the actual update. After the update completed on one ESXi host, virtual machines were vMotioned to the other ESXi host, and that allowed the second ESXi host to be updated. After both ESXi hosts were updated, vSphere DRS took care about a good distribution of load, which means virtual machines were again migrated. You now know how to use the vSphere Lifecycle Manager to manage ESXi host image updates on a per cluster basis. With the vSphere Lifecycle Manager, you can check compliance of the ESXi hosts in a cluster, and you can easily remediate non-compliant hosts by performing automated updates. vSphere DRS takes care of virtual machine migration so that there are no interruptions during the updates. Having the knowledge how to use the vSphere Lifecycle Manager will make your life much easier when you have to manage ESXi images on your hosts. Thank you for watching this lab demonstration video. I hope the knowledge acquired here will help you with your daily job assignments, and good luck as you continue your journey in VMware world.